Oh yes. Oh, you have a background. I didn't realize that. Well, uh, oh, this is the lo-fi beats or whatever. That live stream thing. Alright. No, but I mean like it's from the live stream because I've watched it before. If we use it in the live stream. Oh, so you have the box on your face in case you didn't know that. Like the box that tracks your face. Your well, how's first? It's been over a month since you streamed today. Oh yes. Time to turn or time to exit the stream. Now that I've viewed. Yes, because I don't want to hear myself twice. I can't do that because the volume is one. Like since I'm using Discord on my phone and YouTube on my phone. Yeah, then why are you accusing me of set? Why is it ASMR at the end? Actually, oh, Nathan's here. I'm leaving if you keep this up. Wait, are we starting first page? I'm assuming. Oh yeah, got it. Right there. I don't know how well you could hear that, but I just rumbled the paper. Gave myself a paper cut. But it's okay. I'll live. Wait, Zach, say something really loud. Because I don't... Yeah, I didn't realize this because I'm in Discord with you, but the stream can't hear you. I kind of noticed that a minute ago, but then... Yeah. Alright, Nathan, the issue is...
Okay, hello? Loud? Really loud?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay, I was gonna do something. Oh yeah, I need to open Streamlabs so I know if anybody donates me $1. I mean, somebody might want to mess me up and...
Zach, what if somebody at page 28 or however many pages there are? Okay, let's say 27. What if somebody at page 27, one page before the end, tells you to restart? Would you go back to first page 1?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna wait till the last page, and then actually I can't donate to Streamlabs because I don't have a credit card. I got cash. It's so warm in our room, Zach.
Do you not have that, like, small...
No, it's still here. It's just still warm because it's warm out, but it's not that bad. It was pretty bad the other day, like on Tuesday and Monday. Zach, you gonna start?
No, I have to do something. I'm setting it up so, like...
With the Streamlabs?
I'm setting up so I can say what page I'm on.
Wait, I don't know if I can hear you anymore on the stream.
What? You should be able to. It says you can.
No, you're just really quiet. That's what it is.
Okay, I'll turn it up. Is that better?
It's a little better. It's still pretty quiet though.
Okay, I'll turn it even more up. Okay, Dalton, are you ready? Are we starting at where it says chapter 1, or are we starting at America before Columbus?
America before Columbus. Nobody's gonna read that first section.
Okay. I have 5 watching me read. Okay, I better
there's
start
5
then.
people here.
Yeah.
I am here, so that does count myself.
Okay. We still know relatively, relatively. I don't even know. I'm so bad at
relatively.
reading. Okay, I'm bad at reading out loud. We still know relatively little about the first peoples in America. What do we know? What we do know comes from scattered archaeological discoveries, new evidences from artifacts that have survived over many millennia.
Good job, Zach.
For many decades, scholars believe that all early migrations into America came from humans crossing an ancient land bridge over the Bering Strait into what is now Alaska, approximately 11,000 years ago. These immigrants then traveled from the glacial north through an unfrozen corridor between 2 great ice sheets until they reached the non-glacial lands to the south. The migrations were probably a result of the development of new stone tools-spears and other hunting implements with which migrating people could pursue the large animals that regularly crossed between Asia and America. All of these land-based migrants are thought to have come from a Mongolian stock related to that of modern-day Siberia. They are known to scholars as the Clovis, people named for a town in New Mexico. The Clovis people established one of the first civilizations in the Americas. Archaeologists believe that they lived about 13,000 years ago. They were among the first people to make tools and to eat other animals. The Clovis are believed to have migrated from Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge into Alaska. From there, they moved southward to warmer regions, including New Mexico. More recent archaeological evidence, however, suggests that not all of the early migrants came across the Bering Strait. Some migrants from Asia appear to have settled as far south as Chile and Peru, even before people began moving into North America by land. This suggests that the first South Americans may have not come by land, but by sea, using boats. Other discoveries on other continents made clear that migrants have traveled by water much earlier to populate Japan, Australia, and other areas of the Pacific. Those discoveries suggest that migrants were capable of making long ocean voyages long enough to bring them into the American coasts. Nice.
Page down.
Oh, look, hi, Jackson.
I was about to say Jackson's here.
Oh, this has so much more words. I'm just gonna rip it so I can read it better.
Oh, yeah.
The new evidence suggests that early populations of the Americas was much more diverse and more scattered than scholars used to believe. Some people came to the Americas from farther south in Asia than Mongolia, perhaps Polynesia and Japan. Polynesia, not Polynesia. Recent DNA evidence has identified that what may have been yet another population group that, unlike most other American groups, don't seem to have Asian characteristics. Thus, it is also possible that thousands of years before Columbus, there may have been some migration from Europe or Africa. Most Indians in the Americas today share relatively similar characteristics, and those characteristics link them to modern Siberians and Mongolians. But that does not prove the Mongolian migrants were the only immigrants to the Americas. It should suggest rather that Mongolian migrants eventually came up to dominate and perhaps eliminate earlier population groups. The Archaic period is a scholarly term for the history of humans in America during a period of about 5,000 years, beginning around 8,000 BCE. In the first part of this period, most humans continued to support themselves through hunting and gathering, using the same stone tools. Oh, look, a person. Using the same stone tools that earlier Americans had brought with them from Asia. Some of the largest animals that the earliest humans in America once hunted became extinct during the Archaic period. But archaic people continued to hunt with spears in the area later known as the Great Plains of North America, who then, as centuries later, pursued bison, also known as buffalo. Bows and arrows were unknown in most of North America until 400 to 500 CE. Later in the Archaic period, population also began to develop new tools to perform work. Among them were nets and hooks for fishing, traps for smaller animals, and baskets for gathering berries, nuts, seeds, and other plants. Later, some groups began to farm, through much of the Americas. The most important farm crop was corn, but many agricultural communities also grew other crops such as beans and squash. In agricultural areas, the first sedentary settlements slowly began to form, creating the basis for larger society. This is so bad. I'm so bad at reading.
Civilizations and society.
Whatever.
So what exactly is this book you're reading to me?
So we have a history quiz tomorrow. And so I'm reading it, you know?
It's like 20-something pages.
Yeah, it's 27 pages, and what I just read when he joined in was not even half of one page.
Nice.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Wait, how long? So it's been 12 minutes for about one page.
Not that long.
Okay, I can't read. It's The Growth of Civilizations, the South. That's the next chapter. The South. Dalton, I think you need to get more people, okay? Actually, no. Whoever... That's Tim, right? The other person?
That was Tim, yeah.
Okay. If he's here, he should do that.
What?
The most elaborate early civilizations emerged south of what is now the United States, in South and Central America, and what is now Mexico. In Peru, the Incas created the largest empire. That's something important. The Incas created the largest empire, Dalton. In Americas, they began a small tribe in the mountainous region of Cusco, I don't know. In the early 15th century, spurred by a powerful leader, Pachacuti, the world shaker, his empire stretched all along almost 2,000 miles of western South Africa. It was an empire created as much by persuasion as by force. Pachacuti, whatever you want to call him. His agents fanned out around the region and explained the beliefs of the empire to people in the areas the Incas hoped to control. Most local leaders eventually allied themselves with the Incas. The empire was sustained by innovative administrative systems and by creations of large networks of paved roads. Another great civilization emerged from the so-called Mesoamericans. The people of what is now Mexico and much of Central America, not Asia. Organized societies emerged in these regions as early as 10,000 BCE, and the first truly complex society in the Americas of the Olmec people began in approximately 1000 BCE. A more sophisticated culture emerged beginning around 800 CE in parts of Central America and in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, in an area known as Maya. Maya civilization developed a written language, a numerical system similar to the Arabic, an accurate calendar, an advanced agricultural system, and an important trade routes into other areas of the continent. Gradually, the societies of the Mayan regions were followed by the other Mesoamerican tribes. They became collectively and somewhat inaccurately, or collectively as known. Oh, that's why. They became known collectively and somewhat inaccurately as the Aztecs. They called themselves Mexica, a name that eventually came to describe people of a number of different tribes. In about 1300 CE, the Mexica established a city which was named Tenochtitlan on a large island in a lake in central Mexico, the site of present-day Mexico City. The Mexica soon incorporated the people of other tribes into their society as well. It became by far the greatest city ever created in the Americas at that point, or to that point, with a population as high as 100,000 by 1500. Connected to water supplies from across the region by aqueducts, the residents of Tenochtitlan also created large and impressive public buildings, schools that all male children attended, an organized military, a medical system, and a slave workforce drawn from conquered tribes. They gradually established their dominance over almost all of central Mexico and beyond. Through a system of tribute, a heavy tax paid in crops, clothes, and animals, enforced by military power. The people ruled by the Mexica maintained a significant element of independence nevertheless, and many of them consider the Mexica to be tyrannical rulers, but too powerful to resist. Tyrannical, I don't even know how to say that word. Like other Mesoamerican societies, the Mexica developed a religion based on a belief in human sacrifice. Unlike earlier societies in the Americas, whose sacrifices to the god emphasized bloodletting and other non-fatal techniques, the Mexica also believed that the gods could not be satisfied by being fed, or could be satisfied by being fed the living hearts of humans. But the Mexica also believed that the gods could be satisfied only by being fed the living hearts of humans. As a result, they sacrificed people, largely prisoners captured in combat, on a scale unknown in other American civilizations. The Mesoamerican civilizations were for many centuries the center of civilized life in North and Central America, the hub of culture and trade. Disease and disunity made it difficult for them to survive the European invasions, but they were nevertheless very great civilizations, all the more impressive because they lacked some of the crucial techniques that Asian and European societies had long employed. As late as the 16th century CE, no American society had yet developed wheeled vehicles.
You're almost there, Zach.
Yeah, I know.
You're real close.
Well, but like, they're connected, so I'm not going to stop at the page. The people north of Mexico and the lands that became the United States and Canada did not develop empires as large or political systems as elaborate as those of the Incas, Mayas, and Mexico. They built complex civilizations of great variety that subsisted on hunting, gathering, and fishing. The Eskimos of the Arctic Circle fished and hunted seals. Fished, not finished.
Good job.
Shush. Their civilization spanned thousands of miles of largely frozen land, which they traversed by dog sled. The big game hunters of the northern forests led nomadic lives based on pursuits of moose and caribou. The tribes of the Pacific Northwest, whose principal occupation was salmon fishing, created substantial permanent settlements along the coast, engaged in constant and often violent competition with one another for access to natural resources. Another group of tribes spread through the more arid regions of the far west and developed successful communities, many of them quite wealthy and densely populated based on fishing, hunting, small game, and gathering. Other societies in America were primarily agricultural. Among the most elaborate were those in the Southwest. The people of the region built I'm going to show the picture. It's pretty beautiful. Oh, you can't even see that. The light's too bright. Anyway, built large irrigation systems to allow farming on the relatively dry land. They constructed substantial towns that became centers of trade, craft, and religious and civic ritual. The densely populated settlements of Chaco Canyon and elsewhere consisted of stone and adobe terrace structures known as pueblos, many of which resembled the large apartment buildings of later eras in size and design. In the Great Plains, too, most tribes were engaged in sedentary farming, corn and other grains, and lived permanent settlements, although there were some small nomadic tribes that subsisted by hunting buffalo. Only in the 18th century, after Europeans had introduced the horse to North America, did buffalo hunting begin to support a large population in the region. At that point, many once sedentary farmers left the land to pursue the great migratory buffalo herds. The eastern third of what is now the United States, much of it covered with forests and inhabited by people who have thus become known as woodland Indians, had the greatest food resources of any region of the continent. Many tribes lived there, and most of them engaged in farming, hunting, gathering, and fishing. In the south, there were substantial permanent settlements and large trading networks based on corn and other grains grown in the rich lands of the Mississippi River Valley. Among the major cities that emerged as a result of trade was Cahokia, near present-day St. Louis, which at its peak in 1200 CE had a population of about 10,000 and contained a great complex of large eastern mounds. Who's Azan? Hola, konnichiwa, hi. The agricultural societies of Northeast were... Oh, my thing still says I'm playing Minecraft. I need to remove that. Let's say I am...
Wait, what says you're playing Minecraft?
If you were to, the game, it says the game I'm playing is Minecraft. Education, that's definitely what this is. Right, Dalton?
Yeah, 100%.
I need to find more music. This one's almost out. Where was I?
I can't hear the music, but then again, you are at... Just restart the paragraph, the agricultural societies. You weren't very far in that paragraph.
Okay, let's see. I have 10 more minutes of music. The agricultural societies of the Northeast were more nomadic than those in the other regions. Much of the land in the region was less fertile than other regions because farming was newer and less established. Most tribes combined farming with hunting. Farming techniques in the Northeast were usually designed to exploit the land quickly rather than to develop permanent settlements. Natives often cleared the land by setting forest fires or cutting into trees to kill them. They then planted crops, corn, beans, squash, pumpkins, and others among the dead or blackened trunks. After a few years, when the land became exhausted or filth from a settlement began to accumulate, they moved on and established themselves elsewhere. In some parts of eastern North America, villages dispersed every winter and families foraged in the wilderness until warm weathers returned. Those who survived then reassembled to begin farming again. Most of the tribes living east of the Mississippi River were linked together loosely by common linguistic roots. The largest of the language groups was the Algonquian, which dominated the Atlantic seaboard from Canada to Virginia. Another important language group was the Iroquoian, centered in what is now upstate New York. The Iroquois included at least 5 distinct northern nations: the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk, and had links as well with the Cherokees and the Tuscaras farther south. In the Carolinas and Georgia, the third largest group, the Muskogee, included the tribes of the southmost region of the eastern seaboard, the Chickasaws, Choctaws, Creeks, and Seminoles. Alliances among the various Indian societies were fragile, since the people of America did not think of themselves as members of a single civilization. Oh, this makes me yawn.
Then don't yawn.
I can't not yawn.
Well, then just say no.
No. Okay. The enormous diversity of economic, social, and political structures among the North American Indians make large generalizations about the cultures difficult. What? About their cultures difficult? I don't know what that's trying to say. In the last centuries, before the arrival of the Europeans, however, Native Americans, like people in other areas of the world, were experiencing an agricultural revolution. In all regions of the United States, tribes were becoming more sedentary and were developing new sources of food, clothing, and shelter. Most regions were experiencing significant population growth. Virtually all were developing the sorts of elaborate social customs and rituals that only stationary societies can produce. Religion was important to Indian societies as was to most other cultures, and it was usually closely bound up with natural world on which the tribes depended. Native Americans worshipped many gods whom they associated with crops, game, forests, rivers, and other elements of nature. Some tribes created elaborate, brightly colored totems as part of their religious ritual. Most staged large festivals on such important occasions as harvest or major hunts. As in other parts of the world, the societies of North America tended to divide tasks according to gender. All tribes assigned women the job of caring for children, preparing meals, and gathering certain foods, but the allocation of other tasks varied from one society to another. Some tribal groups, notably the Pueblos of Southwest, reserved farming tasks almost entirely for men. Among others, including the Iroquois, the Iroquois, and the Muskogees, women tended the field while men engaged in hunting, warfare, or clearing land. Iroquois women and children were often left alone for extended periods while men were away hunting or fighting battles. As a result, women tended to control the social and economic organizations of the settlement and played powerful roles within family. Yeah, Nathan, I really do want to fall asleep. Ugh. Europeans were almost entirely unaware of the existence of the Americas before the 15th century. A few early wanderers, Leif Erikson and an 11th century Norse seaman, and perhaps others, had glimpsed parts of the New World and had demonstrated that Europeans were capable of crossing the ocean to reach it. But even if their discoveries had become common knowledge, and they had not, there would have been little incentive for others to follow. Europe in the Middle Ages, roughly 500 to 1500 CE, was not an adventurous civilization. Divided into innumerable small duchies and kingdoms, Europe had an overwhelmingly provincial outlook. Subsistence agriculture predominated and commerce was limited. Few merchants looked beyond the boundaries of their own regions. The Roman Catholic Church exercised a measure of spiritual authority over most of the continent, and the Holy Roman Empire provided at least a nominal political center. Even so, real power was widely dispersed. Only rarely could a single leader launch a great venue. Gradually, however, conditions in Europe changed so that by the late 15th century, interest in overseas exploration had grown. Dalton, I'm about to die.
Zach, okay, so just that last page, I timed it. It took me about 5 minutes to read that last page. And that wasn't even a full page.
I'm so tired.
You are 8 pages in, Zach. Technically only 7. Technically, you read 6 because there wasn't a page 1, and you obviously haven't read page 8. So, you've read 6 pages.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 pages.
We're gonna be here well.
Yeah, that's like a lot. That's like 2 hours.
I have an idea. Like, how about you read the first half and I'll read the last half?
Okay,
That'll
what
work.
does the half end?
After 10 pages. So 20 divided by 2 is.
Wait, there's only 20 pages?
You just said you had 20 pages left.
Oh,
Zach, no,
so
I
you're
say
not
we read
counting
it-
the other ones. Okay.
No, Zach, I say we read it at the same time. That'll save some time.
No, okay. I need to find a new music before I let this one end.
How many people are watching the stream?
Like one.
That's what losers watching the stream.
Nathan.
Wait, is Nathan still here?
I think so.
Okay, so if each page hypothetically takes an average of 5 minutes to read, which is on the right side,
It will take me another hour before
It'll
it's your
take-
turn.
yeah. Yeah.
So basically, we're just gonna be here a while.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Zach, wait.
What?
Before you start, I have a better idea. So you don't die of boredom. Instead of you reading 10 pages and I read 10 pages,
We alternate.
just yes.
Okay, I was gonna say that, but I'm like, oh no, he's probably gonna say no.
Oh crap! What is my next page?
Oh, is it a lot?
Look at it.
I
Like compared
can't,
to
I'm
the
ripping them.
current. Oh. Well, it's just the back of the page you're about to read, unless you want to give me the short page.
Fine, you can have the short page since it's my stream.
Yes. Am I starting at the very top?
Wait, let me look at the page again.
Wait.
No, just start. Wait. Yes, you do start with that.
Okay. I got this. Early in the 20th century, when the professional study of history was still relatively new, many historians believed that questions about the past could be answered with the same certainty and precision that questions in more scientific fields could be answered. By sifting through available records, using precise methods of research and analysis, and producing careful and closely argued accounts of the past, they believed they could create definite histories that would survive without controversy. Scholars who adhered to this view believed what? Okay. Is it?
Nope.
What? I don't understand.
Okay,
Okay,
maybe you weren't supposed to read that.
Turn to the bottom. Okay. Commerce and nationalism. Two important and related changes provided the first incentive for Europeans to look towards new lands. One was a result of the significant population growth in the 15th century Europe. The Black Death, a catastrophic epidemic of the bubonic plague that became Constantinople in 1347, decimated Europe, killing, according to some estimates, more than a third of the people of the continent, and debilitating its already limited economy. But a century and a half later, the population had rebounded. With that growth came a rise in land values, a reawakening of commerce, and a general increase in prosperity. Affluent landlords became eager to purchase goods from distant regions, and a new merchant class emerged to meet their demands. As trade increased and as advances in navigation and shipbuilding made long-distance sea travel more feasible, interest in developing new markets, finding new products, and opening new trade routes rapidly increased. A lot of that. Awesome. Paralleling the rise of commerce in Europe, and in part responsible for it, was the rise of the new governments that were more united and powerful than the feeble political entities of feudal past. In western areas of Europe, the authority of the distant Pope and the even more distant Holy Roman Emperor were necessarily weak. As a result, strong new monarchs emerged and created centralized nation-states with national courts, national armies, and perhaps most important, national taxes. As the ambitious kings and queens consolidated their power and increased their wealth, they became eager to enhance the commercial growth of their nation. Ever since the early 14th century, when Marco Polo and other adventurers have returned from Asia, bearing exotic goods, spices, fabrics, dyes, and exotic tales, Europeans who hoped for commercial glory had dreamed of trade with the East. For 2 centuries, that trade has been limited by the difficulties of a long, arduous overland journey to the Asian courts.
Oh, so that all top thing was part of what you were reading.
Oh,
I'm just gonna skip it.
yeah, we don't need that.
So I actually got the shorter page. Actually, no, they're about even.
Yeah.
Journey to the Asian courts. But in the 14th century, as the maritime capabilities of several Western European societies increased, and as Muslim societies seized control of the eastern routes to Asia, there began to be serious talk of finding a faster, safer sea route to Asia. Such dreams found a receptive audience in the courts of the new monarchs. By the late 15th century, some of them were ready to finance daring voyages of exploration. The first to do so were the Portuguese. They were the prominent maritime power in the 15th century, in large part because of the work of one man, Prince Harry, the navigator. Henry's own principal interest was in finding a sea route to Asia, but in exploring the west coast of Africa. He dreamed of establishing a Christian empire there to aid in country's wars against the Moors of northern Africa, and he hoped to find new stores of gold. The exploration he began did not fulfill his own hopes, but they ultimately led further than he had dreamed. Some of Henry's maritimes went as far south as Cape Verde on Africa's west coast. In 1486, 6 years after Henry's death, Bartholomew Diaz rounded to the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, and in 1497 to 1498, Vasco da Gama proceeded all the way around the Cape to India. In 1500, the next fleet bound for India under the command of Pedro Cabral was blown westward off its southerly course and happened upon the coast of Brazil. But by then, another man in the service of another country had already encountered the New World. Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus, who was born and reared in Genoa, Italy, obtained most of his seafaring experience in the service of the Portuguese. As a young man, he became intrigued with the possibility, already under discrimination in many seafaring circles, of reaching Asia by not going east but west. Columbus's hopes rested on several basic misconceptions, whatever. He believed that the world was far smaller than it actually is. Okay, the top part is still the smaller text, so I don't think you need to read it.
Yeah, I'm not going to. He also believed that the Asian continent extended further eastward than it actually does. He assumed, therefore, that the Atlantic was narrow enough to be crossed on a relatively brief voyage. It did not occur to him that anything lay in the west between Europe and Asia. Columbus failed to win support for his plan in Portugal, so he returned to Spain. The Spaniards were not yet as advanced maritime people as the Portuguese, but they were at least as energetic and ambitious. In the 15th century, the marriage of Spain's two most powerful regional rulers, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabel of Castile, had produced the strongest monarchy in Europe. Like other young monarchies, Spain soon grew eager to demonstrate its strength by sponsoring new commercial ventures. Columbus appealed to Queen Isabella for support for his proposed westward voyage in 1492. Isabella. Yeah, I didn't pronounce it Italian. Okay?
Italian.
In 1492, Isabella agreed to Columbus's request, commanding 90 men and 3 ships: the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
Pinta.
The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Columbus left Spain in August 1492 and sailed west into the Atlantic on what he thought was a straight course for Japan.
10 weeks later, he sighted land and assured he had reached his target. In fact, he had landed on an island in the Bahamas. When he pushed on and encountered Cuba, he assumed he had reached China. He returned to Spain in triumph, bringing with him several captured natives as evidence of his achievement. He called the natives Indians because he believed they were from the East Indies in the Pacific. But Columbus had not, of course, encountered the court of the Great Khan in China or the fabled wealth of the Indies. A year later, therefore, he tried again, this time with a much larger expedition. As before, he headed in the Caribbean, discovering several other islands and leaving a small and short-lived colony on Hispaniola. On a third voyage in 1498, he finally reached the mainland and cruised along the northern coast of South America. When he passed the mouth of the Orinoco River in present-day Venezuela, he concluded for the first time that he had discovered what was not an island off the coast of China, as he had assumed, but a separate continent, such as a freshwater stream. Such a large freshwater stream, he realized, could emerge only from a large body of land. Still, he remained convinced that Asia was only a short distance away, and although he failed in efforts to sail around the northeastern coast of South America to the Indies, he returned to Spain believing that he had explored at least the fringes of the Far East. He continued to believe that for the rest of his life. Columbus's celebrated accomplishments made him a popular hero for a time, but he later died in obscurity. When Europeans at last gave a name to the New World, they ignored him. The distinction went instead to Florence, Italy, merchant, Amerigo Vespucci, a member of a later Portuguese expedition to the New World, who wrote a series of vivid descriptions of the lands he had visited, and who recognized the Americas as new continents. Columbus had been celebrated for centuries as the Admiral of the Ocean Sea, and as a representative of the new secular scientific impulses of the Renaissance Europe. But Columbus was also a deeply religious man, even something of a mystic. His voyages were inspired as much by his conviction that he was fulfilling a divine mission as by his request in geography and trade. A strong believer in biblical prophecies, he came to see as a man destined to advance the coming of the millennium. God made me the messenger of the new heaven and the new earth, Columbus wrote near the end of his life, and he showed me the spot where to find it. A similar combination of worldly and religious passions lay behind many subsequent efforts at exploration and settlement in the New World.
We're gonna be here a while, in case that wasn't obvious. Anybody still left in the stream?
I don't know.
Okay, got me some water, so I'm all good now. Partly as a result of Columbus's initiative, Spain began to devote greater resources and energy to maritime exploration, and gradually replaced Portugal as a leading seafaring nation. The Spaniard Vasco de Balboa fought his way across the Isthmus of Panama in 1513. He became the first known European to gaze westward upon the great ocean that separated the Americas from China and the Indies. Seeking access to that ocean, Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese in the employ of the Spanish, found the strait that now bears his name at the southern end of South America. He struggled through the stormy narrows and into the ocean, so calm by contrast that he christened it the Pacific, then proceeded to the Philippines. There Magellan died in a conflict with the natives, but his expedition went on to complete the first known circumnavigation of the globe, 1519 to 1592, or 1522. By 1550, Spaniards had explored the coasts of North America as far north as Oregon in the west and Labrador in the east, as well as some of the interior regions of the continent. In time, Spanish explorers in the New World stopped thinking of America simply as an obstacle for their search for a route to the east. They began instead to consider a possible source of wealth, rivaling and even surpassing the original Indies. On the basis of Columbus's discoveries, the Spanish claimed for themselves the whole of the New World, except for a piece of it, today's Brazil, that was reserved for a papal degree for the Portuguese. By the mid-16th century, the Spanish were well on their way to establishing a substantial American empire. The first Spanish colonists whom Columbus brought on his second voyage settled on the islands of the Caribbean, where they tried to enslave the Indians and find gold. They had little luck in either effort, but then in 1518, Hernando Cortez led a small military expedition of about 600 men into Mexico. Cortez had been a Spanish government official in Cuba for 14 years, and to that point had achieved little success. But when he heard stories of great treasures in Mexico, he decided to go in search of them. He met strong and resourceful resistance from the Aztecs and their powerful empire, Montezuma. But Cortez and his army had unknowingly unleashed an assault on the Aztecs far more devastating than military attack. They had exposed the natives to smallpox during an early and relatively peaceful visit to Tenochtitlan. A smallpox epidemic decimated the population and made it possible for the Spanish to triumph in their second attempt at conquest.
1 second.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's at the stream.
Matthew's not in here. I can't ask him for water. Wait, am I still on this page?
You're on the page with the big picture at the top that's got like people fighting and somebody in a chicken suit.
The Spanish believe that what?
Wait, I was about to say we're getting close to halfway.
The Spanish believed that the epidemic was a vindication of their efforts. When the Christians were exhausted from war, one follower of Cortez said at the time, God saw fit to send the Indians smallpox. Through his ruthless oppression of the surviving natives, Cortez established a lasting reputation as the most brutal of the Spanish conquistadors. The news that silver was found in Mexico attracted the attention of other Spaniards. From the island colonies and from Spain itself, a wave of conquistadors descended on the main island in search of fortune. Francisco Pizarro, who conquered Peru 1532 to 1538 and revealed to Europeans the health of the Incas, opened the way for other advances in South America. His one-time deputy, Hernando de Soto, in a futile search for gold, silver, and jewels, led several expeditions, 1539 through 1541, through Florida, west into the continent, and became the first white man known to have crossed the Mississippi River. Francisco Coronado traveled north from Mexico, 1540 to 1542, into what is now New Mexico, a similarly fruitless search for gold and jewels in the process. He helped open the southwest of what is now the United States to the Spanish settlement. The story of the Spanish warriors is one of great military daring and achievement. It is also the sort of story of great brutality and greed, a story that would be repeated time and again over centuries of European conquest of the Americas. The conquistadors in some areas exterminated the native populations through a combination of warfare and disease.
I've noticed since we started switching back and forth, none of these pages have been full pages of text.
Yeah, no, it's
that's
great.
That's a lot of time.
Oh, wait, Dalton, flip yours over.
I just saw. That's unfortunate for you, Zach. Okay, well, next page. What's that supposed to say? Spanish American thing? I don't know. Lured by dreams of treasure, Spanish explorers, conquistadors, and colonists established a vast empire for Spain in the New World. The history of the Spanish Empire spanned three distinct periods. The first was the age of discovery and exploration, beginning with Columbus and continuing through the first 2 decades of the 16th century. The second was the age of conquest, in which Spanish military forces, aided by the diseases they unleashed, established their dominion over the lands once ruled by natives. The third phase began in the 1570s,
when new Spanish laws, the Ordinances of Discovery, banned the most brutal military conquest. From that point on, the Spanish expanded their presence in America through colonization. The first Spaniards to arrive in the New World, the conquistadors, had been interested in only one thing: getting rich, and in that they were fabulously successful. For 300 years, beginning in the 16th century, the mines in Spanish America yielded more than 10 times as much gold and silver as the rest of the world's mines put together. These riches made Spain the wealthiest and most powerful nation for a time. After the first wave of conquest, however, most Spanish settlers in America traveled to the New World for other reasons. Many went in hopes of creating a profitable agricultural economy. Unlike the conquistadors, who left little but destruction behind them, these settlers helped establish elements of European civilization in America that permanently altered both the landscape and the social structure. Another important force for colonization was the Catholic Church. Ferdinand and Isabella, in establishing Spain's claim to most of the Americas from Mexico south, bowed to the wishes of the Church and established the requirement that Catholicism be the only religion of the new territories. Spain abided by that condition. Although the Spanish founded commercial and military centers in the 16th century, another common form of settlement by the early 17th century was the Catholic mission. Missions had commercial lives, but their primary purpose, at least at first, was converting natives to Catholicism. There were usually military garrisons connected to the missions to protect the Europeans from hostile natives. Presidios, military bases, often grew up nearby to provide additional protection. Good luck, Zach.
No, this song's on every low-feed stupid thing. I don't want it.
It's okay, Zach.
How long can a song be?
No one's even watching this. It's okay.
But how am I supposed to go back and review tomorrow morning? Because obviously I'm going to watch 2 hours of review.
Hey, Zach, it's going to be over 2 hours. I kind of hope. I need to take a shower and I don't want to be up to the load.
Well, we can just stop at any point, you know?
No, Zach, we have to finish.
Okay.
I haven't read too far, so I don't want to fail the first quiz. Continue. Good luck.
I'm going to speed read, okay? Where did he stop?
It's literally the first line, Zach, of the page. It's like, indeed, after the era of the conquistadors.
Oh, that's a new sentence.
Yes.
Indeed, after the era of conquistadors came to a close in the 1540s, a missionary impulse became one of the most important motives for European immigration to the Americas. Priests or friars accompanied almost all of the colonizing ventures. Through the zealous work, the gospel of the Catholic Church ultimately extended throughout South and Central America, Mexico, and into South and Southwest of the present United States. The Spanish fort, established in 1565 at St. Augustine, Florida, became the first permanent European settlement in what is now the United States. It served as a military outpost and administrative center for Franciscan missionaries and headquarters for unsuccessful campaigns against North American natives that were ultimately abandoned. But it did not mark the beginning of a substantial effort at colonizing in the region. A more substantial colonizing venture began 30 years later in the Southwest. In 1598, Don Juan de Onate traveled north from Mexico with a party of 500 men. He claimed for Spain some of the lands of the Pueblos Indians that Cornando had passed through over 50 years before. The Spanish migrants established a colony in what is now New Mexico, modeled roughly on those the Spanish had created farther south. Onate distributed encomiendas to the Spanish settlers. They were licenses to exact labor and tribute from the natives in specific areas. The Spanish demanded.
I thought you were joking, Zach.
No, Dalton, I'm better. I'm tired. I was so confused. Demanded
Oh my
tribute.
gosh.
Stop. You're gonna make me continue laughing. The Spanish demanded tribute from the local Indians, and at times commandeered them as laborers. Spanish colonists founded Santa Fe in 1609. Onate's harsh treatment of the natives, who greatly outnumbered the small Spanish population, threatened the stability of the new. I can't do this song. No, seriously, if it's speaking, I can't listen to it.
Why do you have music on in the first place? I don't have music.
I'm using non-speaking music.
Yeah, even when I use non-speaking music, which I don't often, it bothers me.
It doesn't bother me if it's not speaking.
Onate's.
Shush. Onate's. I'm sorry. Onate's harsh treatment of the natives threatened the stability of the new colony and led to his removal as governor in 1606. Over time, relations between the Spanish and the Pueblos improved. Substantial numbers of Pueblos converted to Christianity under the influence of Spanish missionaries. Others entered into important trading relationships with the Spanish. The colonies remained precarious, nevertheless, because of the danger of the Apache and Navajo raiders who threatened the Spanish and Pueblos alike. Even so, the New Mexico settlement continued to grow. By 1680, there were over 2,000 Spanish colonies living among the 30,000 Pueblos. The economic heart of the colonies was not the gold and the precious metals the early Spanish explorers had tried in vain to find. It was cattle and sheep raised on the ranchos that stretched out around the small towns Spanish settlers established. In 1680, the colony was nearly destroyed when the Pueblos rose in revolt. In the 1660s and 70s, the Spanish priests and the colonial governments, which was closely tied to the missionaries, launched efforts to suppress tribal rituals the Europeans considered incompatible with Christianity. The discontent among the Native Americans that the suppression survived for decades. More important as a cause of Pueblos' revolt of 1680 was a major drought and series of raids by neighboring Apache tribes. The instability three events sparked the uprising. An Indian religious leader named Pope led an uprising that killed hundreds of European settlers, including 21 priests, capturing Santa Fe and drove the Spanish temporarily from the region. But 12 years later, the Spanish returned. ADHD or whatever. Resizing Pueblos lands. What? Resizing? Seizing Pueblos land and crushed the last revolt in 1696. Spanish exploration of the Pueblos did not end, but after the revolts, many Spanish colonists realized that they could not prosper in New Mexico if they remained constantly in conflict with the native population that greatly outnumbered them. They tried to solve the problem in two ways. On one hand, the Spanish intensified their efforts to assimilate the Indians, baptizing Indian children at birth and enforcing observance of Catholic rituals. On the other hand, they were now permitted the Pueblos to own land. They stopped commandeering Indian labor. They replaced the command system with a less demanding and oppressive one, and the tactility tolerated the practice of tribal religious rituals. These efforts were at least partially successful. After a while, there was significant intermarriage between Europeans and Indians increasingly. The Pueblos came to consider the Spanish their allies in the continuing battles of the Apaches and Navajos. By 1750, the Spanish population had grown modestly to about 4,000. The Pueblos population had declined through disease-worn migration to about 1,300, less than half what it had been in 1680. New Mexico by then was a reasonably stable but still weak and isolated outpost of the Spanish Empire. By the end of the 16th century, the Spanish Empire had become one of the largest in the history of the world. It included the islands of the Caribbean and the coastal areas of South America that had been the first targets of the Spanish exploration. It extended to Mexico and southern North America, where a second wave of colonizers had established outposts. Most of all, the empire spread southward and westward in vast landmass of South America, the areas that are now Chile, Argentina, and Peru. In 1580, when the Spanish and Portuguese monarchies temporarily united, Brazil came under Spanish jurisdiction as well. It was, however, a colonial empire very different from the one the English established in North America beginning in the early 17th century. The earliest Spanish ventured in the New World had been largely independent of the throne, but by the end of the 16th century, the monarchy had extended its authority directly into the governance of local communities. Colonists had few opportunities to establish political institutions. That's right. Independent of Spain. There was also a significant economic difference between the Spanish Empire and the later British one. The Spanish were far more successful than the British would be in extracting great surface wealth, gold and silver, from the American colonies, but they concentrated less on energy on making agriculture and commerce. Oh, it's this page. In commerce profitable in their colonies.
The strict commercial policies of the Spanish government start over. The strict commercial policies of the Spanish government, policies that the British Empire was never strong enough to impose on their colonies to the north, made things worse. To enforce the collection of duties and to provide protection against pirates, the government established rigid, restrictive regulations that required all trade with the colonies to go through a single Spanish port and only a few colonial ports, and fleets making but 2 voyages a year. The system stifled economic development of the Spanish areas of the New World. There was also an important difference between the character of the population in the Spanish Empire and that of the colonies to the north. Almost from the beginning, the English, Dutch, and French colonies in North America concentrated on establishing permanent settlements and family life in the New World. The Europeans in North America reproduced rapidly after their first difficult years, and in time came to outnumber the natives. The Spanish, by contrast, ruled their empire, but did not people it. In the first century of settlement, fewer than 250,000 settlers in the Spanish colonies were from Spain itself, or from any other European country. Only about 200,000 more arrived in the first half of the 17th century. More additional settlers came from various outposts of Spanish civilization in the Atlantic, the Azores, the Cape Verde Islands, and elsewhere. But even though with those sources, the number of European settlers in Spanish America remained very small relative to the native population. Despite the ravages of disease and war, the vast majority of the population of the Spanish Empire continued to consist of natives. The Spanish, in other words, imposed a small ruling class upon a much larger existing population. They did not create a self-contained European society in the New World, as the English would attempt to do in North America. Biological and cultural exchanges. The line separating the races in the Spanish Empire gradually grew less distinct than they would be in the English colonies to the north. European and native cultures never entirely merged in the Spanish colonies. Indeed, significant differences remain today between European and Indian cultures throughout South and Central America. Europeans would not have been exploring the Americas at all without the early contacts from the natives. From them, they first learned of the rich deposits of gold and silver. After that, the history of the Americas became one of the increasing levels of exchange, some beneficial, some catastrophic, among different peoples and cultures. The first and most profound result of this exchange was the importation of European diseases to the New World. It would be difficult to exaggerate the consequence consequences of the exposure of Native Americans to illnesses as influenza, measles, chickenpox, mumps, typhus, and above all, smallpox, diseases to which Europeans had over time developed at least a partial immunity to, but to which Native Americans were tragically millions died.
Okay, I'm just checking how many pages we've read and how long it's take.
We're on page
1,
17.
2,
But
3.
because I wrote all the numbers in the corner, so we've read 15 pages because there's not a page 1. Yeah. And there's, let's see. So we're on the 16th page.
On actual pages, we are like halfway there. Like not
No,
page numbers, like physical sheets of paper. There's 7
yeah.
and 7.
We're a little more than that. Cause let's see, cause I already had the page number written in the corner. The page we're on right now says 17, but I started with the 2 that it said in the corner. Really, it's page 16, meaning we read 15 pages so far, and then there's 28 pages, meaning that there's actually 27 pages.
Yeah, the last
meaning
page
there's
has
12 pages
nothing.
left. Does it have nothing? It's got a little bit. If you count the last page. Last page is technically 28, which is the one with the vocab and stuff on it.
So we have
So
like
we're-
15 more.
No, we got 1, 2. Wait, let me make sure I mark this. 1, 2, 3, 4,
13 more.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How did you get 13?
I don't know. 15 plus 13 is 28.
No, I'm just counting the actual page. Oh no, it's not 28. It's 27 because, like I said, there's no page 1. So there's really 27 pages,
Okay.
and then we've read 15 on the 16th. We're getting there, Zach.
I'm just taking like a couple second breaks so I can speak normally, you know?
Yeah, there's a couple big pages coming up. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah,
The
your next two. The next two.
No, counting this one, both of our next 2 pages are pretty big. Both our next 3 pages are pretty big.
Oh
and after
my.
that, it's not too bad. Up here's a big page. I don't know if
Okay,
that's
so it's
one.
pretty bad. Those are
There's
the ones
6
that take like 6 minutes each.
There's like 7 big pages left. Good luck.
Okay, at 1:10 I'll start back. That's 2 minutes. No, I'll
Wait,
start back
1:10?
now. Never mind.
What's 1:10? The stream?
An hour and
Timer?
10 minutes, yeah.
We're
But I'm
have
just
to
gonna
scroll
start.
along. Okay.
Millions died. Native groups inhabiting some of the large Caribbean islands and some areas of Mexico were virtually extinct within 50 years of the first contact with whites. On Hispaniola, where the Dominican Republic and Haiti are today, and where Columbus landed and established a small, short-lived colony in the 1490s, not 1940s. 1490s, the native population quickly declined from approximately 1 million to about 500. Dang. In the Mayan areas of Mexico, as much as 95% of the population perished within a few years of the first contact with the Spanish. Some groups fared better than others. Some of the tribes north of Mexico whose contact with the European settlers came later and less intimately were spared the worst of the epidemics. But most areas in the New World experienced a demographic catastrophe at least as grave as, and in many places far worse than, the Black Death that had killed at least a third of the population of Europe 2 centuries before. The decimation of native populations in the southwest regions of the Americas was not, however, purely a result of this inadvertent exposure to medicine. It was a result of the conquistadors' deliberate policy of subjugation and extermination. Their brutality was part of a reflection of the ruthlessness with which Europeans waged war in all parts of the world. It was also a result of conviction that natives were savages, uncivilized people, whom they considered somehow not fully human. Not all aspects of the exchange were so disastrous to the natives. The Europeans introduced important new crops to the Americas, among sugar and bananas, domestic livestock, cattle, pigs, and sheep, and perhaps most significantly, the horse, which had disappeared from the Western Hemisphere in the Ice Age and now returned when Spanish ships in the 16th century. With Spanish ships in the 16th century. The Europeans imported these things for their own use, but Indian tribes soon learned to cultivate the new crops, and European livestock proliferated rapidly and spread wildly among natives. In the past, most tribes had possessed no domesticated animals other than dogs. The horse, in particular, became central to the lives of many natives and transformed their societies. The exchange was not at least as important and far more beneficial to the Europeans. In both North and South America, the arriving white people learned new agricultural techniques from the natives. Techniques often better adapted to the character of the new land than those they had brought with them from Europe. They discovered new crops, above all maize, or corn, which became an important staple among the settlers. Columbus took corn back to Europe from his first trip to America, and it soon spread through much of Europe as well. Such American foods as squash, pumpkins, beans, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, and potatoes also found their way to Europe, and in revolutionized European agriculture. Agricultural discoveries ultimately proved more important to the future of Europe than the gold and silver the conquistadors valued so highly. In South America, Central America, and Mexico, societies emerged in which Europeans and natives lived in intimate, if unequal, contact with one another. As a result, Indians adopted many features of European civilization. Many natives gradually came to learn Spanish or Portuguese, but in the process they created a large range of dialects, combining the European languages with their own. European missionaries, through both persuasion and coercion, spread Catholicism through most areas of Spanish Empire, but native Christians tended to connect the new creed with features of the old religions, creating a hybrid of faiths that were, while essentially Christian, nevertheless distinctively American. Colonial officials were expected to take their wives with them to America, but among the ordinary settlers, the majority European men outnumbered European women by at least 10-1. Not surprisingly, therefore, the Spanish immigrants had substantial sexual contact with native women. Intermarriage became frequent. And long before the population of the colonies came to be dominated, numerically at least, by people of mixed race or mezzitos.
Okay, it's a big boy page. And my water. Okay. You done, Zach?
With what?
You're beatboxing.
Mezzitos, Dalton, start.
Okay, I'm waiting for you. Through much of the Spanish Empire, an elaborate racial hierarchy developed, with the Spanish at the top, natives at the bottom, and people of mixed races in between. Racial categories, however, were much more fluid than the Spanish wanted to believe, and did not long remain fixed. Over time, the wealth and influence of a family often came to define its place in the racial hierarchy more defensively than the race itself. Eventually, a successful or powerful person could become Spanish, regardless of his or her actual ancestry. Natives were the principal labor source for the Europeans. Virtually, all the commercial, agricultural, and mining enterprises the Spanish and Portuguese colonies depended on an Indian workforce. Different labor systems emerged in different areas of the Spanish Empire. In some places, Indians were sold into slavery. More often, colonists used a wage system closely related, but not identical to slavery, by which Indians were forced to work in the mines and on the plantations for fixed periods, unable to leave without the consent of their employers. Such workforces survived in some areas of the South American mainland for many centuries. So great was the need for native labor that European settlers were less interested in acquiring land than they were in gaining control over Indian villages, which could become a source of labor. Even so, the native populations could not meet all the labor needs of the colonists, particularly since the native population had declined and in some places virtually vanished because of disease and of war. As early as 1502, therefore, European settlers began importing slaves from Africa.
Time out. We bored Nathan to sleep.
No.
He said I passed out.
My gosh. He's gonna fail the quiz tomorrow.
Yeah, like, because he didn't message us.
On page 7. That's about where I started reading. I think I started reading, like, just before then.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
That was, like, half an hour to 45 minutes ago.
Good luck, Nathan.
Yeah.
Okay, go back.
Most of the African men and women were forcibly taken to America. Came from a lot. No. Most of the African men and women who were forcibly taken to America came from a large region in West Africa below the Sahara Desert known as Guinea. It was the home of a wide variety of peoples and cultures, since over half of the new arrivals in the New World between 1500 and 1800 were Africans. Those cultures greatly affected the character of American civilization. Europeans and white Americans came to portray African society as primitive and uncivilized, in part to justify the enslavement of Africa's people. But most Africans were civilized people with well-developed economies and political systems. Humans began settling in West Africa at least 10,000 years ago. By the 15th century CE, they had developed extensive civilizations and complex political systems. The residents of Upper Guinea had substantial commercial contact with the Mediterranean world trading ivory, gold, and slaves for finished goods. Largely as a result, they became early converts to Islam. After the collapse of the ancient kingdom of Ghana around 1100 CE, the even larger empire of Mali emerged and survived well into the 15th century. Its great city, Timbuktu, became fabled as a trading center and a seat of education. Africans further south were more isolated from Europe and the Mediterranean. They were also more politically fragmented. Central unit in much of the south was the village, which usually consisted of members of an extended family group. Some groups of villages united in small kingdoms, among them Benin, Congo, and Songhay. But no large empires emerged in the south comparable to Ghana and the Mali kingdoms further north. Nevertheless, these southern societies also developed extensive trade in woven fabrics, ceramics, and wooden and iron goods, as well as crops and livestock, both among themselves and to a lesser degree with the outside world. The African civilizations naturally developed economies that reflected the climates and resources of their land, and the extensive trade with Mediterranean lands were the foundation of the economy. Further south, Africans grew wheat and other crops, raised livestock, and fished. There were some nomadic tribes of the interior which subsisted largely of hunting and gathering and developed less elaborate social systems. But most Africans were sedentary people linked by elaborate political, economic, and
Sedentary.
Sedentary. Zach, you cannot. Wait, yeah, sedentary. Yeah, you can't talk, Zach.
I
You
can't.
messed
Okay, I
up.
guess you have to keep
You
finishing.
couldn't say demanded.
What demanded?
I can't believe you messed that up. That bad. Okay, well, we're almost there, Zach. We got like 9 pages left. Is that how math works? Wait.
1,
No.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Yeah, we got
9,
9.
10. Oh no, because there's no back, so 9.
Yep. If we don't read the next page too much, it won't be that bad. I'm gonna go get some water, but you go ahead and read.
I need Matthew to get me more water. Okay, wait, so Dalton, are you gone yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so do I have to read that top part where it's most Americans understood that in this 20th century? Do I need to read that? Because it's in like the smaller text.
Zach, I can entertain your stream while you get yourself water.
Zach, that's not your page.
What?
Your page is like many Native American society. Your society. Get another long page.
No. Hey, Matthew.
What?
Wait, do you want to read?
Do I want to?
Because that's what I'm doing. No, not you,
you
Dalton.
want Matthew.
Do you want to read?
Yeah, Matthew should read a page.
Entertain the chat.
No, you can't enter. You can get me water, or you can read this page.
The whole page. What happens if you get back?
Then I'll sit and watch you read it.
No.
Fine. How about this first half?
No.
Okay.
I'm
We go
not
get me
gonna-
water then.
No.
I'll let you use my drone on Friday. Not Thursday though. It comes in Thursday. I'll be using it all day Thursday.
You probably already let me use it.
Yeah, probably. Oh, whatever. Like many Native American societies, but unlike those in Europe, African societies tended to be matrilineal. I don't even know what that word means.
No one cares that.
Oh, it says what it means, which means that people who trace their heredity through an inherited property from their mothers rather than their fathers. When a couple married, the father left his own family to join the family of his wife. Like most other peoples, African divided work by gender, but the nature of the divisions varied greatly from place to place. Women played a major role, often the dominant role, in trade. In many areas, they were the principal farmers, while the men hunted, fished, and raised livestock. And everywhere, they managed child care and food preparation. Most tribes also divided political power by gender, with men choosing leaders and systems for managing what they defined as the male affairs, and women choosing parallel leaders to handle female matters. See, that's smart. Like, I don't think that would work anymore, but that's pretty smart.
Big brain.
Tribal chiefs generally were men, although in some places there was a woman counterpart, but the position customarily passed down not to the chief's son, but to the chief's son of the eldest sister, but to the son of the eldest chief's to the chief's eldest sister. African societies, in short, were characterized by a greater design of sexual equality than those of the other parts of the world at the time. In those areas of West Africa where indigenous religions had survived the spread of Islam, people worshipped many gods whom they associated with various aspects of the natural world, and whose spirits they believed lived in trees, rocks, forests, and streams. I almost said steams. Most Africans also developed form of ancestor worship and took care in tracing family lineage. The most revered priests tracing family lineage. The most revered priests, who were often also important social and political leaders as well, were generally the oldest people in the tribe. African societies had elaborate systems of social ranks or hierarchies. Small elites of priests and nobles stood at the top. Most people belonged to the large middle group or farmers, traders, craft workers, and others. At the bottom of society were slave men and women who were put into bondage after being captured in wars or because of criminal behavior or unpaid debts. Slavery in Africa was not usually permanent. People were generally placed in bondage for a fixed period and in the meantime retained certain legal protections, including the right to marry. Their children, moreover, did not inherit their parents' condition or of bondage. The African slave trade became long before the European migration to the New World. As early as the 18th century CE, West Africans began selling slaves to traders from the Mediterranean. They were responding to the demand from affluent families who wanted black men and women as domestic servants. They were also responding to the more general labor shortages in some areas of Europe and North Africa. When Portuguese sailors began exploring the coast of Africa in the 15th century, they too bought slaves, usually criminals and people captured in war, and took them back into Portugal, where there was a small but steady demand. By the 1500s, people from Guinea region had moved into much of sub-Saharan Africa and traded gold, ivory, pepper, and many other precious commodities. That's how you pronounce it. In the 16th century, however, the market for slaves grew dramatically. Oh my gosh. I
Frank,
just
you can pronounce
combined.
anything
I just combined.
drastically.
I just combined drastically and dramatically. Grew dramatically. I can't. Grew dramatically as a result of the rising European demand for sugarcane. The small areas of sugar civilization in the Mediterranean were proving inadequate, and production soon moved to the island of the Madeira, off the African coast, which became a Portuguese colony. Not long after that, it was moved to the Caribbean island and Brazil. Sugar was a labor-intensive crop, and demand for workers in these new areas increased rapidly. European slave traders responded to the demand by increasing the recruitment of workers from along the coast of West Africa, and for some areas of West Africa as well. As the demand increased, African kingdoms warred with one another in an effort to capture potential slaves to exchange for European goods. At first, the slave traders were overwhelmingly Portuguese, and to a lesser extent Spanish. By the 17th century, the Dutch had won control of most of the slave market. In the 18th century, the English dominated it. Despite some false claims, Jews were never significantly involved in the slave trade. By 1700, slavery had begun to spread well beyond its original locations in the Caribbean and South America and into the English colonies to the north. England's first documented contact with the New World came only 5 years after Spain's, in 1497. John Cabot, like Columbus, a native Italy, since Genoa, sailed to the northeastern coast of North America on an expedition sponsored by King Henry VII. Other English navigators continued Cabot's unsuccessful search for northwestern passage through the New World to the Orient. They explored other areas of North America during the 16th century, but even through England, claimed dominion over the lands its explorers surveyed. Nearly a century passed before the English made any serious efforts to establish colonies there. Like other European nations, England had to experience an internal transformation before it could begin settling new lands. The transformation occurred in the 16th century. Part of the attraction of the New World to the English was its newness. Its contrast to the old troubled land. America seemed a place where human settlement could start anew, where a perfect society could be created without flaws and iniquities of the old world. Such dreams began to emerge in England only a few years after Columbus's voyages. They found a classic expression in Sir Thomas More's Utopia, published in Latin in 1516, translated into English 35 years later, which described a mythical and nearly perfect society on an imaginary island supposedly discovered by companion of Amerigo Vespucci in the waters of the New World. Matthew, wait time. Matthew,
Really exciting read.
Matthew.
What?
If
Well,
you
we'll get to
take
do
this, Matthew, I will do the dishes next, even though your name's next.
I'm fine with doing it.
I just want somebody to go get me water because I can't do it.
Fine, I'll read some of your page.
Well, no, I'm already done with my page.
Then can I just entertain chat?
No, I have to listen.
To what?
I'm trying to learn here, actually.
You have
Yeah.
to listen to what?
To Dalton, speak.
Did he not realize that?
Yeah, Dalton's doing half. I'm doing the other half.
Yeah, I listen to
But then I won't know what it says.
it. And put your stream on your phone.
What?
Put your stream on
Why
your
is
phone.
Matthew so lazy that he can't
Oh
go
my
downstairs and get you a cup of water?
I don't know. Okay,
Okay.
go, Dalton. I'm getting some water.
Okay. Moore's picture of an ideal community was, among things, a comment on social and economic ills in England at the time. The people of Tudor England suffered from frequent and costly European wars, constant religious strife, and above all, harsh economic transformation of the countryside. Because the worldwide demand for growing rapidly, many landowners were finding it profitable to convert their land from fields to crops, or from fields for crops to pastures for sheep. The result was a significant growth in the trade. That meant land worked at one time by agricultural serfs and later by rent-paying tenant farmers was steadily enclosed for sheep runs and taken away from them. Thousands of evicted tenants roamed the countryside in gangs, begging from and at times robbing the more fortunate those those whose communities they passed. The government passed various laws designed to halt enclosures, relieve the worthy poor, and compel the able-bodied or sturdy beggars to work. Such laws had little effect. The enclosure movement continued unabated, and few of the dislocated farmers could find reemployment in raising sheep or manufacturing wool. For removing land from cultivation, the enclosure movement also limited England's ability to feed its rising population, which grew from 3 million in 1485 to 4 million in 16. Because of both the dislocation of farmers and the restriction of the food supply, therefore, England hit a serious problem of surplus population. Amid this growing distress, a rising class of merchant capitalism was prospering from the expansion of trade. At first, England had exported little except raw, but new merchant capitalists helped create a domestic industry that allowed them to begin marketing finished goods at home and abroad. At first, most exporters did business almost entirely as individuals. In time, however, some merchants joined and formed chartered companies. Each such enterprise operated on the basis of a charter acquired from the monarch, which gave the company a monopoly for trading in a particular region.
Okay, I have to use the bathroom, so I'm just gonna take a pause right here. And I'll be back in like 5 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Entertain the stream.
Ooh, see, let's look at the stream actually. Anybody here? Was Nathan still here? Wait, I got an idea. Wait, what's the channel? There it is. Oh, wait. Want to play? I got this. Hub's act doesn't have group muted. Does he? I can't tell. I gotta mute him on my end. Does he have him muted? Wait. I can't even hear my the stream. It's very quiet. Oh, he does have Groovy muted. Well, I'll listen to some bombs. Oh my gosh, my volume is way too loud. But yeah. It's time. I think I hear Matthew sniffling in the background. You ever just listen to Bob Ross? in a bottle. Oh yeah. Is anybody here? I'm about to check the stream chat. Yeah.
Excellent.
Uh,
Excellent.
Nathan apparently got some. I didn't read that. Isaac.
Okay.
Jack, you had Groovy muted. So sad.
Yeah,
Playing some-
because it could play like a not good, like not copyrighted song, you know, if you.
Well, you could play Bob Ross. I don't think Bob Ross is copyrighted. Okay. Sorry, Groovy, you got to go.
Okay. Right now in the bathroom, we don't have dish soap, or not dish soap, like soap for hands. So I put body wash into the hand soap container, and then put like half water, and it actually works really well, and it makes your hands smell good. It smells like men's body wash.
Nice. Zach, I bet your body wash is just beef. You smell like beef.
You smell like beef. Okay. Among the first of these were the Muscovy Company, 1555, the Levant Company, 1581, the Barbary Company, 1585, the Guinea.
Guinea.
I don't think so.
It's like a guinea pig.
I don't think so. Guinea Company, 1588, and the East India Company, 1600. Investors in these companies often made fantastic profits from the exchange of English manufactures, especially woolen, for exotic goods, and they felt a powerful urge to continue the expansion of the profitable trade. Central to the drive was the emergence of the new concept of economic life known as mercantilism.
Mercantilism.
Nah, it's tillism, definitely. Mercantilism, you know? Mercantilism. Yeah, mercantilism resisted.
Oh my gosh.
What? I'm
Keep going.
tired. Now I'm messed up. I can't say it right or wrong. Mercatl. I spelled it wrong anyway. Mercantilism, whatever, close enough, rested on the assumption that the nation as a whole, not the individuals within, was the principal actor in the economy. The goal of economic activity should be to increase the nation's total wealth. Mercantilists, close enough, believe that the world's wealth was finite. One person or nation could grow rich at the expense of another. A nation's economic health depended, therefore, on extracting as much wealth as possible from foreign lands and exporting as little wealth as possible from home. The principles of mercantilism guided the economic policies of virtually all the European nation-states in the 16th and 17th century. Mercantilism. How do you actually say it, Dalton?
Mercantilism.
So I was saying it right that time?
I think so.
Okay.
You kind of cut out when you...
Mercantilism greatly enhanced the position of the new merchants, capitalists, whose overseas ventures were thought to benefit the entire nation, to be worthy of government assistance. It also increased competition among nations. Every European state was trying to find markets for its exports while trying to limit its imports. One result of the increased attractiveness of acquiring colonies, which could become the source of goods that a country might otherwise have to buy from other nations. In England, the mercantilistic program thrived at first on the basis of flourishing wool trade within the European continent, and particularly within the great cloth market in Antwerp. Beginning in the 1550s, however, the glutted market collapsed, and English merchants, Matthew, chill.
I'm sorry.
Found themselves Obliged.
Obligati.
Obligated. It doesn't say that, but it's the same use. Obliged? Is that? I don't even know. To look elsewhere for overseas trades. The establishment of colonies seemed to be a ready answer to that and the other problems. Richard Hakluyt, an Oxford clergyman and the outstanding English propagandist for colonization, argued that colonies would not only create new markets for English goods, but they would help alleviate poverty and unemployment by siphoning off the surplus population. For the poor who remained in England, idly to the annoy of the whole state, of the prosperity the colonies would create. Perhaps most important, colonies' commerce would allow England to acquire products of its own new territory from its own new territories, for which the nation had previously been dependent on foreign trade, rival products such as lumber, naval stones, and all above, silver and gold. In addition to these economic motives for colonization, the religious ones. Rooted in the events of the European and English Reformation, the Protestant Reformation began in Germany in 1517 when Martin Luther openly challenged some of the basic practices and beliefs of the Roman Catholic Church until then. Of the Roman Catholic Church. Until then, the supreme religious authority and also one of the strongest political authorities throughout Western Europe, Luther, an Augustinian monk and ordained priest, challenged the Catholic belief that salvation could be achieved through good works and through loyalty or payments to the church itself. He denied the church's claims that God communicated to the world through the Pope and the clergy. The Bible, not the church, was the authentic voice of God, Luther claimed, and salvation was to be formed not through works or through the formal practice of religion, but through faith alone. Luther's challenge quickly won him a wide following among ordinary men and women in Northern Europe. He himself insisted that he was not revolting against the church, that his purpose was to reform it from within. But when the people when the Pope excommunicated him in 1520, Luther defied him and began to lead his followers out of the Catholic Church entirely. A schism.
I'm getting pretty close. It's got like
5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
this is 7, but that last one didn't have much. Okay. The big boy page. It's the last like big page, I think.
No, there's one. Page 30 is a lot.
Oh yes.
It's yours.
Oh yes.
See you at the next two
Okay.
big pages.
Well, I get that really short last one. Okay, time to start reading. A schism within the European Christianity become that was never to be healed. As the spirit of the Reformation spread rapidly throughout Europe, other dissidents began offering alternatives to Orthodox Catholicism. The French theologian John Calvin was, after Luther, the most influential reformer, and went even further than Luther had in rejecting the Catholic belief that human institutions could affect an individual's prospects for salvation. Calvin introduced the doctrine of predestination. God elected some people to be saved and condemned other to damnation. Each person's destiny was determined before birth, and no one could change that predetermined fate. But while individuals could change, while individuals could not alter their destinies, they could strive to know them. Calvinist believes that the way people led their lives might reveal to them their chances of salvation. A wicked or useless existence would be a sign of damnation. Saintlessness, diligence, and success could be signs.
Diligence.
Zach, shut up. It wasn't even that bad. Could be signs of grace. Calvinism created anxieties among his followers, to be sure. But I lost my spot. Where was I? but it also produced a strong incentive to lead virtuous, productive lives. The new creed spread rapidly throughout northern Europe and produced, among other groups, the Huguenots. Is that how you say it? I don't
Yes,
know
I
what that.
think so. Huguenots.
The Huguenots in France and Puritans in England. The English Reformation was very different from the Protestant Reformation. It occurred more because of a political dispute between the king and the pope than as a result of the doctrinal revolts.
I'll just mute my mic.
Okay. Crap. I got distracted. Oh yeah. In 1529, King Henry VIII became angry by the Pope's refusal to grant him a divorce. It's Henry VIII. Yeah, good. Angry to refusal to grant him a divorce from the Spanish wife, who had failed to bear him the son he desperately wanted. In response, he broke England's ties with the Catholic Church and established himself as the head of the Christian faith in his country. He made relatively few other changes in English Christianity. However, after his death, the survival of Protestantism remained in doubt for a time. When Henry's Catholic daughter Mary ascended the throne, she quickly restored England's allegiance to Rome and harshly prosecuted those who refused to return to the Catholic fold. Many Protestants were executed, the origin of the Queen's enduring nickname Bloody Mary. Others fled to the European continent, where they came into contact with the most radical ideas of the Reformation. Mary died in 1558, and her half-sister Elizabeth became England's sovereign. Elizabeth once again served the nation's connection with the Catholic Church, and along with it, an alliance with Spain that Mary had forged. The Church of England, as the official religion, was now known, satisfied the Church of England, as the official religion, was now known, satisfied the political objectives of the Queen, but it failed to satisfy the religious desires of many English Christians. Catholics continued to assert allegiance to the Pope. More important, many Protestants believed that the Reformation did not create enough chances in theology. The most ardent Protestants became known as the Puritans because they hoped to purify the Church. Some Puritans took genuinely radical positions. They were known as separatists, and they were determined to worship as they pleased in their own independent congregations. That flew in the face of English law, which outlawed unauthorized religious meetings, required all subjects to attend regular Anglican services, and levy taxes to support the established church. The radicalism of the separatists were visible in their rejection of prevailing assumptions about the proper religious roles of women. Many separatist sects, perhaps most prominently the Quakers, permitted women to serve as preachers, which would have been impossible in the established church. Most Puritans resisted separatism. Still, their demands were by no means modest. They wanted to simplify Anglican forms of worship. They wanted to reduce the power of the bishops, who were appointed by the crown and who were, in many cases, openly corrupt and highly extravagant. Perhaps above all, they wanted to reform the local clergy, many of them greedy, uneducated men with little interest in or knowledge of theology. Puritan discontent, already festering, grew rapidly after the death of Elizabeth, the last of the Tudors, and the ascension to the throne of James I, a Scotsman, and the first of the Stuarts in 1603. Zach, your mic's muted.
I forgot.
Did you just start reading?
I didn't get very far. I said James believed
I mean, I kind
kings
of doubt you
ruled.
could get very far.
That's all I said, and then you're like, Zach. James believed kings ruled by divine right, and he felt no obligation to compromise with his opponents. He quickly antagonized the Puritans, a group that included most of the rising businessmen, by resorting to arbitrary taxation, by favoring English Catholics and granting charters and other favors, and by supporting high church forms of ceremony. By the early 17th century, some religious nonconformists were beginning to look for places of refuge outside the kingdom. Along with the other economic and social incentives for colonization, such as religious discontent, helped turn England's gaze to distant lands. England's first experience with colonization came not in the New World, but in the land separated from Berlin only by a narrow stretch of the sea.
Actually, I think that's a Berlin. Yeah.
Land separated from Britain only by a narrow stretch of the sea, Ireland. The English had long laid claim to this island and for many years maintained small settlements in areas around Dublin. Only in the second half of the 16th century, however, did serious effects at large-scale colonization begin during the 1560s and the 1570s. Would-be colonists moved through Ireland, capturing territory and attempting to subdue the native population.
That was such a short page there.
Yeah, I know. It's so lucky.
And then I have this one, and then my next page is a big fat page.
Yummy.
And I got a really short page. Okay. In the process, they developed many of the assumptions that would guide later English colonists in America. The most important of these assumptions are that the native population, approximately 1 million people, loyal to the Catholic Church with their own language, Gaelic, is Gaelic, and their own culture, is a collection of wild, vicious, and ignorant savages. The Irish lived in ways the English considered crude and wasteful, like beasts, and they fought back against the intruders with a ferocity that the English considered barbaric. Some people could not be tamed, the English concluded. They certainly could not be assimilated into English society. They must, therefore, be suppressed and isolated, and if necessary, destroyed. Eventually, they would be civilized, but only after they were thoroughly subordinated. Whatever barbarities the Irish may have inflicted on the colonized, the English more than matched them in return. Sir Humphrey Gilbert, who was later to establish the first British colony in the New World, an unsuccessful venture in Newfoundland, served for a time as governor of one of the Irish districts and suppressed native rebellions with extraordinary viciousness. Gilbert was an educated and supposedly civilized man, but he considered the natives less than human and therefore not entitled to whatever decencies civilized people reserve for their treatment of one another. As a result, he managed to justify, both to himself and to others, such atrocities as beheading Irish soldiers after they were killed in battle. Gilbert himself, Sir Walter Raleigh, Sir Richard Grenville, and others active in Ireland in the mid-16th century derived from their experiences, their outlook they'll take to America, where they made similarly vicious efforts to subdue and subjugate the natives. Oh, yes.
Dalton, before we continue on, I have a question.
I might have an answer.
When does the challenges finish for the weekly challenge thing in Fortnite? I know it said 15 hours like 6 hours ago. I think.
It updates at 9. That's what's happened. I'm pretty sure it's been 9.
9 p.m.
No, 9 a.m.
Okay, so I'll have time after this to finish them because I just have to do like 100 more AR damage.
Oh yeah, that'd be a quick team rumble game. But yeah, you'll definitely have time to know. It doesn't reset till 9 a.m. tomorrow. So
okay, thank you.
Welcome.
The Irish experience led the English to another important and related assumption about colonization. That the English settlements in distant lands must retain a rigid separation from the native populations. In Ireland, English colonizers established what they called plantations, transplantations of English society in foreign land. Unlike the Spanish in the America, the English in Ireland did not try to simply rule a subdued native population. They tried to build a separate society, people with immigrants from England itself. The new society would exist within a pale of settlement, an area physically separated from the natives. That concept, too, they would take with them in the New World, even though in Ireland, as later in America, the separation of peoples and the preservation of pure English culture proved impossible. Is your sister laughing?
My mic was muted. No.
Okay, that was the music. That was really creepy.
What?
It sounded like your sister laughing.
Yeah, my mind was muted. I just went to the
That was
bathroom.
creepy.
So I know. Yeah, that's not me.
English settlers in North America, unlike those in Ireland, would encounter not only natives but also other Europeans who were, like them, driven by mercantilist ideas to establish economic outposts abroad. To the south and southwest was the Spanish Empire. Spain's ships continued to threaten English settlements along the coast for years, but except for Mexico and scattered outposts such as those in Florida and New Mexico, the Spanish made little serious effort to colonize North America. England's more formidable North American rivals in the early 16th century were the French. France founded its first permanent settlement in America at Quebec in 1608, less than a year later after the English started their first colony at Jamestown. The French colony's population grew very slowly. First French Catholics felt an inclination to leave their homeland, and the French Protestants who might have wished to immigrate were excluded from the colony. The French, however, exercised an influence in the New World to disappropriate their numbers.
Disproportionate.
Whatever, anyway. Largely because of their relationship with Native Americans, unlike Matthew... Okay, thank you. Unlike the English, who for many years hugged the coastline and traded with the Indians of the interior through intermediaries, the French forged close direct ties with the natives deep inside the continent. French Jesuit missionaries were among the first to penetrate Indian societies, and they established some of the first contacts between the two people. More important still were the Coureurs de Bois I don't even know. Fur traders and trappers who were also moved far into the wilderness and developed an extensive trade that became one of the underpinnings of the French colonial economy. The fur trade was, in fact, more an Indian than a French enterprise. The the Coureurs de Bois were in many ways...
I don't know.
Good,
I
don't care.
It seems like you
In many ways, little more than agents of the Algonquins and the Hurons, who were the principal fur traders among the Indians of the region, and from the French purchased their pelts. The French traders were able to function only to the degree that they could form partnerships with the Indians. Successful partnerships often resulted from their ability to become part of the native society. Living among the Indians and at the time marrying Indian women, the fur traders helped open the way for other elements of the French presence in North America. The agricultural estates along the St. Lawrence River, the development of trade and military centers at Quebec and Montreal, and the creation of an alliance with the Algonquins and the others. That enabled the French to compete with more numerous British in the contest.
For control of North America, Zach. Finish your sentence.
What? That wasn't a period?
You just said in the contest.
Conquest.
It's contest.
Wait, where was I reading? I don't know. I already lost it.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
wait, in the contest for control of North America.
I don't know why you just...
I don't know. I thought I saw a period.
This is the last big page, and then it's all downhill, because we only have 2 pages after that, and one of them's not really a page. I'll have time to take a shower. Yeah, I want to be asleep before 9:30, so I'll be fine.
Why do you want to be asleep before 9:30? Wow, loser.
Because I am tired, and I need to get my sleep schedule back together. Anyway, oh yeah, that alliance also brought the French into conflict with the Iroquois. Okay.
No, I have no clue how it's pronounced.
The Iroquois, the Algonquins, ancient enemies, who assumed the central role in the English fur trade. An early result of these tensions was a 1609 attack led by Samuel de Champlain, the founder of Quebec, on a band of Mohawks, apparently at the instigation of the Algonquin trading partners. The Dutch, too, were establishing a presence in North America. The Netherlands had won its independence from Spain in the early 17th century and became one of the leading trading nations of the world. Its merchant fleet was larger than England's, and its traders were active not only in Europe but also in Africa, Asia, and increasingly in America. In 1609, an English explorer in the employ of the Dutch, Henry Hudson, sailed up the river that was to be named for him in what is now New York State. Because the river was so wide, he believed for a time that he found the long sought water route through the continent to the Pacific. He was wrong, of course, but his explorations led to a Dutch claim of territory in America and to the establishment of a permanent Dutch presence in the New World. For more than a decade after Hudson's voyage, the Dutch maintained an active trade in furs in and around present-day New York. In 1624, the Dutch West India Company established a series of permanent trading posts on the Hudson, Delaware, and the Connecticut rivers. The company actively encouraged settlement on the region, not just from Holland itself, but also from such other parts of Northern Europe as Germany, Sweden, and Finland. It transported whole families to the New World and granted new feudal estates to landlords, patroons, on condition that they bring still more immigrants to America. The result was the colony of New Netherland and its principal town, New Amsterdam, on Manhattan Island. Its population, diverse as it was, remained relatively small. The colony was only loosely united with chronically weak leadership. The first enduring English settlement in the New World was established at Jamestown in Virginia in 1607. But for nearly 30 years before that, English merchants and adventurers have been engaged in a series of failed efforts to create colonies in America. Through much of the 16th century, the English had mixed feelings about the New World. They knew of its existence, and they were intrigued by its possibility. Under the leadership of Elizabeth I, they were developing a powerful sense of nationalism that encouraged dreams of expansion. At the same time, however, England was leery of Spain, which remained the dominant force in America, and it seemed the dominant naval power in Europe. But much changed in the 1570s and 1580s. English sea dogs such as Sir Francis Drake staged successful raids on Spanish merchant ships and built confidence in England's ability to challenge Spanish sea power. More important was the attempted invasion of England in 1588. Philip II, the powerful Spanish king, had recently united his nation with Portugal. He was now determined to end English challenges to Spanish commercial supremacy and to bring the English back into the Catholic Church. He assembled one of the largest military fleets in the history of the warfare, known to history as the Spanish Armada, to carry his troops across the English Channel and into England itself. Philip's bold venture turned into a fiasco when the smaller English fleet dispersed the Armada and in a single stroke ended Spain's domination of the Atlantic. The English now felt much freer to establish themselves in the New World. The pioneers of English colonization were Sir Humphrey Gilbert and his half-brother Sir Walter Raleigh, both friends of Queen Elizabeth and both veterans of the early colonial efforts in Ireland. In 1578, Gilbert obtained from Elizabeth a patent granting him the exclusive right for 6 years to inhabit and possess at his choice all remote and heathen islands, not in the actual possession of any Christian prince. After numerous setbacks, Gilbert led an expedition to Newfoundland in 1583 and took possession of it in the Queen's name. He proceeded southward along the coast, looking for a good place to build a military outpost that might eventually grow into a profitable colony. The storm sank his ship and he was lost at sea. How unfortunate, Mr. Gilbert there. That's so sad. Raleigh was undeterred by Gilbert's misfortune. The next year, he secured from Elizabeth a 6-year grant similar to Gilbert's and sent a small group of men on an expedition to explore the North American coast. They returned with 2 captive Indians, glowing reports of what they had seen. They were particularly enthusiastic about an island the natives called Roanoke. And about that was not my fault. Throat just kind of died there. My throat's kind of like dying in general.
Same.
Yeah, I've drank like 2.5 glasses of water now. They were called Roanoke, and about the area of the mainland just beyond it in what is now North Carolina. Raleigh asked the Queen for permission to name the entire region Virginia in honor of Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. But while Elizabeth granted the permission, she did not offer the financial assistance Raleigh had hoped this flattery would produce. So he turned to private investors to finance another expedition. In 1585, Raleigh recruited his cousin, Sir Richard Grenville, to lead a group of men, most of them from the English plantations in Ireland, to Roanoke to establish a colony. Grenville deposited the settlers on the island to remain long enough to antagonize the natives by raising an Indian village as retaliation for minor theft and returned to England.
The following spring, Sir Francis Drake unexpectedly arrived in Roanoke. With supplies and reinforcements from English long overdue, the
Beleaguered
colonists boarded Drake's ships and left. Raleigh tried again in 1587, sending an expedition carrying 91 men, 17... Why would they only have 17 women but have 91 men? And 9 children, the nucleus, he hoped, of a viable plantation. The settlers landed on Roanoke and attempted to take up where the first group of colonists had left off. Shortly after arriving, one of the women, the daughter of the commander of the expedition, John White, gave birth to a daughter, Virginia Dare, the first American-born child of English parents. While White returned to England after several weeks, leaving his daughter, and granddaughter behind. In search of supplies and additional settlers, he hoped to return in a few months. But the hostilities with Spain intervened, and White did not return to the island for 3 years. When he did, in 1590, he found the island deserted with no clue to the settlers' fate other than the cryptic inscription Croatoan carved on a Prost. Some historians have argued that the colonists were slaughtered by the Indians in retaliation for Grenville's hostilities. Others have contended that they left the settlement and joined native society, ultimately becoming entirely assimilated. But no conclusive solution to the mystery of the lost colony has ever been found. The Roanoke mystery marked the end of the Sir Walter Raleigh's involvement in English colonization of the New World. In 1603, when James I succeeded Elizabeth to the throne, Raleigh was accused of plotting against the king, stripped of his monopoly, and imprisoned for more than a decade. Finally, after being released for one last ill-fated maritime expedition, he was executed by the king in 1618. No later colonizer would receive grants of land in the New World as vast or undefined as those as Raleigh and Gilbert had acquired. But despite the discouraging example of these early experiences, the colonizing impulse remained alive. In the first years of the 17th century, a group of London merchants to whom Raleigh had assigned his charter rights
charter.
Okay, I'm tired. To renew the attempt of colonization of Virginia, a group of merchants from Plymouth and other West country towns were also interested in American ventures and were sponsoring voyages of exploration farther north up to Newfoundland, where West Country fishermen had been going for many years.
You just read like half my page.
Yeah, I know.
In 1606, James I issued a new charter, divided America between the two groups. The London group got the exclusive right to colonize in the south, and the Plymouth merchants received the same right in the north. Through their efforts, the first enduring English colonies were planted in America. That took too long. I'm tired. I need to take a shower. How long did that take? What's the
2
game
hours
timer?
and 9 minutes.
That was a while. Okay, well, thanks for. Actually, nobody's watching the stream.
Yeah, there is. There's
Oh
two
wait,
people. There's two people.
Emerson was here at some point.
Yeah, I said hi.
I haven't
back.
looked in the stream chat in a while. He was probably confused. I'm confused and tired.
Okay, Dalton, I have an awesome idea for a horror video game. So it'd be called
to make a video game.
yeah.
Okay,
So it'd be
That's
called Roanoke. I thought of this when Glenn was explaining. So it'd be called Roanoke, and it would be either a zombie video game where the colonists are zombies and they attack you or whatever, and it's like survival, and you play as the character whatever, Grenville or Raleigh. I forget which one came back and saw them all gone. You know, that was literally a second ago.
You didn't even listen. It was White. That was the name, John White.
Okay, whatever. Anyway, or it'd be like you're John White, and you're landing, and then you find them all beheaded or whatever and dead, and you have to find the Indians and get back at them. I don't know. I feel like
I don't think killing a bunch of Indians would be very good. I don't think people would like that game too much.
But it has to be accurate. Anyway, that was too much for 2 hours.
Yeah,
We're done.
Oh yes.
I'll probably get a 100 tomorrow because of this. I'm not kidding.
Oh yes.
Reading out loud is using 3 things. 3 senses instead of 1. Reading in your head is 1. Mouthing while reading in your head is 2. And then reading out loud is 3 because you're hearing. And it's in your head and it's...
Wait, what's the third sense?
No, it's not
Hearing
actual sense, but it's feeling your mouth move. Well, actually,
smelling. That's it.
No,
That's
touch is a real sense. So, you feel your mouth move.
Well, yeah, but you can touch. It's just I can touch the paper, but I don't have to say it out loud.
No, but you can feel your mouth moving. It helps, I promise. So, that means we're probably better prepared than, Nathan, who fell asleep at page 7.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, whatever, Dalton, I love you.
Okay, bye, Zach.
Wait.
I haven't left yet.
Have a good shower.
Have a good shop. Is that what you said?
Shower.
Oh, okay. Bye, Zach. Wait, say bye to Barry for me.
Oh, he's over on my table.
Well, you have to. I did not ask.
Okay, I'm sorry. Matthew's not upstairs, so I can't. Matthew's not upstairs, so I can't.
I must see Barry. Bring him to the camera. Watching the stream.
What?
Watching the stream. I must see Barry. Bring him to the camera. There's Barry. I see him. Hold him up, Zach. I need to. Okay, there's that blurry bear.
Look, he's a Webkins.
Oh yes.
Wait. Mwah.
There we go. Bye, Zach. And
wait, Dalton, don't leave.
Why?
Who's a good bear?
I don't like this. Bye, Zach.
Wait, why is there 3 people watching now?
Right with that. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm leaving. I need to take a shower. I smell like beef. I don't want to smell like beef. Goodbye.
Stream.